Welcome to the Nebraska Department of Education's Making It Stick Professional Development webinar series. I'm Dr. Michael Quinn, and I'll be your host for Module 13, Infographics. We've all used tables, charts, and graphics to teach our students critical thinking skills. But what about teaching them to create their own? The Infographics webinar will take 30 minutes. Throughout this module, we built in some learner engagement activities to ensure your comprehension. When you see the pencil icon, you'll be asked to pause, reflect, engage, and write in your viewing guide. Feel free to stop, start, and rewind as needed. After you complete the module, we'll ask you a few quick questions to see if we've helped you meet the lesson's objectives. Let's get started. Here's our webinar's umbrella question. How can infographics be used as effective teaching and assessment tools? Because we want students to be able to understand, interpret, and create their own infographics, first, we'll work to understand infographics and why they are effective teaching and assessment tools. Second, we'll learn the skills and steps necessary for student evaluation and creation. Next, we'll identify the elements of well-designed infographics. Finally, we'll use data visualization as part of an analytical process approach to research. After this webinar, you'll be able to define, recognize, and utilize infographics for information dissemination, as a formative assessment, and/or as a summative assessment in your classroom practice. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on how you currently use graphics in your classroom. What types of graphics do you currently use in your classroom? How do you connect the graphic to your instruction? How do your students apply graphics to their learning? What do you ask them to do? Please pause the video for a moment and write about graphics in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. There are always complex, accurate ways to communicate information. How long would it take you to digest a table like the one displayed here? How about your students without any instruction? How about your students with instruction? Remember presenting data in simple tables and Venn diagrams? Or pie charts? Or bar graphs? While desktop publishing has gone a long way towards making our charts look more professional, these examples only tell us part of the story. To offer the best graphic data depictions possible requires research, data gathering, data analysis and extrapolation, and finally, interpretation and presentation. There are simple but also accurate ways to communicate information. Why is this graphic more appealing than the table, Venn diagram, pie chart, and bar graph? Where do your eyes go first? What knowledge are you walking away with? Introducing infographics. These are images that take complex, data-heavy subjects and distill them down to an easily understood visual. They're everywhere. They can be used to explain things quickly, like warning signs, how-to instructions, critical facts, flowcharts, and decision-making processes. Sometimes the small piece of data can hide the really important information, which is only discoverable by drilling deep into the numbers. Taking a closer look at these statistics, however, we can see that there are many things on display that contribute towards making a quality infographic. And while these graphic elements are all good things for students to recognize and understand as we continue moving into a world where so much information has to be communicated, processed, and digested rapidly, the more important elements of a good infographic are that it was constructed as though it were a research paper or a visual essay, with a thesis, verifiable data, and a sound conclusion. Please take a few seconds to evaluate this graphic. Fortunately for us, graphic representations quickly point out weak spots in a student's academic skill set when compared with a written piece. In this graphic, the numbers might very well be right, The poll may have been a check all apply version rather than a pick one style, which would necessarily lead to a graphic where the percentages, when totaled, equaled 100%. So how do we let the reader know why the percentages may exceed 100%? And where's the citation? Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to interpret the infographic on student versus prisoner food. How does the graphic connect to the topic? How could you connect this graphic to your instruction? How did the researchers collect their data? Write one possible thesis statement. What conclusions can you draw from the infographic? Please pause the video for a moment and answer the questions in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. Now that we know the elements that can make great infographics, let's begin making our own. First, it's important to know that infographic generation is a rigorous exercise in data collection and evaluation. There are 3 Nebraska language arts standards that infographics touch on directly, and we need to look at the standards before we dive into the data. All content areas can address the processes noted in these standards. Once upon a time, it would have taken many lessons to address all of these standards. Infographics are convenient in that they combine several standards, skills, and assessments. It's unfortunate that the term infographic has started to sound so casual, because what is required is a great deal of work. It's true that sometimes when a designer is hired, he or she is told, "Graphically show my staff how the organizational changes will work," but more often they have to sift through piles of data. A quick poll of online infographic creators and authors on the topic note that anywhere from 60 to 80% of their time is spent evaluating and analyzing the data. And the analysis is key. Looking at numbers like this table might make sense to people who routinely look at atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations measured at Mauna Loa. But for the rest of us, this is much clearer. Revealing what the data is telling us is just one of the things that infographics can do. Noah Linsky, a visualization and information design expert, says, "That's where the problems can hide. Instead, show only what's interesting or important. Prioritize what matters, what's unexpected, what's actionable. De-emphasize everything else." Students are by nature inquisitive and always looking for more information. When we, or they, drill down further, we can reach new conclusions and see new connections. Students must work with, play with, and make mistakes with the data they find. If they are granted flexibility, they'll have an easier time visualizing possible organizational constructs when presented with random data, just like in real life. It's very possible that if you gave 30 students the exact same set of rich, complex data, they would end up with 30 different conclusions, all of them logical and correct. This is because when the data is rich enough, there are multiple paths and conclusions. One student may be led to research tangential content that can be applied to one area of focus. Another may zoom in on one corner of the data and blow it up, so to speak. These are all good outcomes and line up well with the top of Bloom's pyramid. Students must operate at the highest levels, creating, evaluating, analyzing, to reach well-supported conclusions. It's easier said than done to explore and find the story within the numbers. Exploration is an excellent exercise for students in any content area where it's important for students to see trends or cause and effect relationships. And it goes straight back to our state ELA content area standards. But students could also be asked to tell a particular story or explain a specific event or clarify a complex concept, and in order to do that, they need to take large amounts of data and boil it down, show relationships between and among data, be balanced and unbiased, use 2 kinds of data visualization, exploration and explanation. Once students have their data organized and they know what story they want to tell, visualization becomes key. As students get to know the data more thoroughly, they will need to contemplate some questions. The answers to those questions will lead them to make choices in how they prepare the data for their graphic. Here's the periodic table of visualization methods. And here is an example of the tree metaphor strategy being used to display industrial structure and productivity. The roots, trunk, and branches are used to connect different constructs. When teaching graphics, you'll need to decide if you will give the students data or if you will have them research and find data on their own. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to brainstorm some visual strategies on how to present the 5 pages of data about teenage drivers in your viewing guide. What story does it tell you upon first glance? A second read? Look for trends, causes and effects, points of concern, places where action could be taken or improvements made. How might you organize the data for greatest impact? Please pause the video for a moment, jot down your thoughts, and sketch some ideas in your viewing guide. If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're ready to resume. Visually, what choices did you make to reflect and impact teenage drivers? Were any of the images related to teenagers, gender, cars, or death? Using logical and compelling graphics to display hard numbers is challenging, as is empathizing with our learners. The graphic artists who worked on this had to do some tricky math. In order to represent the longevity and financial success of the teams, they chose to use circles, which were plotted based on numerical data. It may appear to your students that this could be calculated easily by multiplying the diameter of your baseline circle by the level of success up or down. However, circle size is based on area. And this is why attention to data and accurately visualizing the data is so important. When it's time for your students to begin making their own infographics, start by having them examine several exemplary ones. As the students study the exemplars, have them consider these questions. Why? What is it for? How? How did they approach the data? Is any data left out that could have made the infographic clearer? How do you think the designer arrived at this design? Does it do its job? Is it concise? Does it have a thesis? Does it have proof, details, facts? Does it cite sources? Does it use visual elements to communicate? Once you understand your data and have an idea of what you'd like it to say, you have to start deciding how to say it. Planning a layout and a clear visual analogy can be the trickiest part for non-designers, but it's key to a strong result. This is a time when putting students into small collaborative pairings or triads may save time and frustration. Ideally, you would want your students to go into this stage with several sketches. You want to make rough sketches of your ideas. Stick figures and crude pictures are more than appropriate at this stage. Take a look at these 2 sketches. Pause on the next slide for some more inspiration while you work. Here are some factors that might affect your layout choices. Can your story be told chronologically, alphabetically, geographically, categorically, hierarchically? Take some time to consider your options. There are many choices during the last stage of the design process that will help you focus your students' work. Text size, the use of white space, winnowing the data down to its essential, clearest point. Only 3 colors. Sometimes you can have a 4th color for the background. Carefully selected fonts. Include space for citations. Plan the order the information needs to go in to tell the story. Use of simple and recognizable shapes or images to clarify the story. The number of sites that will aid you with creating, presenting, or teaching infographics grows every day. Some of the best are listed here on the screen. Several sites also include links to grading rubrics for use in class as a summative assessment. Either by yourself or in a group, let's take some time to reflect on how you can transform a table into an infographic lesson in your class. Choose one unit from your content area. Imagine, then name a fictional data set that would help you teach a specific topic within your unit. Sketch a table for the fictional data set. Focus on the categories. The actual numbers are irrelevant. Which axes are most relevant? Sketch an infographic that would replace your table. How will you visualize, explore, and explain the data? How will you present the table, infographic, and lesson to your students? List 3 student take-homes from the lesson. Please pause the video for a moment and think forward to how you can implement infographics in your classroom. Are there any existing data sets that you use that lend themselves to the process we've outlined here today? If you're able, share with your colleagues. Press play when you're finished. That brings us to the end of our webinar. Please take a moment to fill out our brief survey by visiting the link provided. Thank you for learning with us today.